Hi, and welcome back to Silverback Designs, home of the world's most bland backgrounds. You can marvel in the blandness of my backgrounds, or you can stick with me and we're going to check the ERCF hardware configuration. This is going to check the stepper motor, it's going to check the gear stepper, it's going to check the tool head switches, and it's going to check all the pre-gate switches. Hang around and let's get started. Okay, we're going to start by going to Happy Hair GitHub. We're going to click on the Wiki tab. We're going to scroll down here to number 3, Essential Configuration. We're going to click on Hardware Configuration, and we're just going to start at the top and work our way through. This mainly deals with configuring MMU hardware.cfg. You can read up here. The first thing we're going to do is look at validating our hardware configuration. We need to go in and check the pins and how they're called out in hardware.cfg. You're going to set up your gate switches. Pre-gate switches are the ones on the Enraged Rabbit Cottontail buffer. The gate switch pin is if you have one directly after the buffer and before it hits the encoder. In the ERCF case, the encoder kind of plays the role of a gate switch pin. The extruder switch pin is the one that is in your tool head directly above the extruder gears. The tool head switch pin is the one in your tool head directly below the extruder gears. You'll need to fill these out. One thing you'll notice here, if I come into hardware.cfg on my particular setup, the gate switch pins here, I've had to reverse these because of the way the PCB I got in a kit was used. Now, we can leave this gate switch pin as a gate sensor. If it's there, but it's not called out elsewhere, it's okay. Here's where I set up the extruder and tool head switch pins. You can see they're on my EBB36 board. This is how you call out a different MCU for those. These are what you need to double check. Now, we've checked through that. We want to check the VARs.cfg for the save variables location. This can be different if you use Klipper that uses a save variables. Basically, this is a scratch pad for Happy Hair and Klipper to write down things that it needs to save and look up again next time around. Now, Happy Hair puts it in here as default. If you have a Klipper setup that uses saves variables, you'll want to point it there, and then Happy Hair will append it to that. So if you use a non-standard one, be sure and change this. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, join the club. You don't have to do anything with this. Happy Hair takes care of that for you. Here's where we get into checking the actual hardware. The first thing we're doing is we're going to check the end stops. We want to turn the MMU motors off first. Just copy that. Just paste that right into the console and then hit the go button. That just turns the motors off. And what that allows us to do is to move things around like the selector. We want to have it right about in the middle for this to make sure we're moving the right direction. Now you can see the selector moves, you're not fighting the motors, you're not making the motor lose steps because it's turned off. We want to copy the next one, and it's query end stops, okay? Copy that, paste that in. Now it's going to output the end stop status. MMU select home, that's our selector, tells it when our selector is home. MMU select touch is used for touch homing on the selector. That is kind of advanced, and it allows the selector to tell, hey, there's filament stuck here and we need to recover it. So there's some functionality there that'll come along later in the tutorials that allows the selector to kind of figure out what's going on. Happy Hair will try and reset if this triggers, but you won't see this trigger now. The tool head sensor, as I said before, is just above the extruder gears, and this shows it is open. That's good. We don't have any filament in there. The tool head sensor is below the extruder gears. We want to see that open because we don't have any filament in it. Now these are just your X, Y, and Z end stops on the printer itself. You probably have those set up. So now the next step we want to do, just move the selector over. The motors are turned off. We just want to jam it up there against that gearbox, and we're going to run it again. One easy way to do it is put your cursor in the entry bar press the up button, hit enter. As you can see, selector home is triggered, and that's what we want to see. Now we're going to check the tool head sensors. And you'll notice up here I've taken the tension screw out of the tensioner just to make this a bit easier. You don't necessarily have to do it, especially if you don't have a camera staring you down. One thing that we can do as well to confirm this, and I'll show you here, if you go to your home screen on Klipper screen, I'm not sure how well you can see it, but your home screen, the extrude screen, and then down here along the bottom, there's your two tool head sensors. And this is in the Happy Hair version of Klipper screen. If you don't have that, get it. It is wonderful. What we're going to do is just take a piece of filament and run it in there. And if I'm not blocking it too much, you'll be able to see that down here, that means they changed. So just to confirm, we're going to go back to our console, hit the up button again, and there we go. Now we see MMU selector home is triggered. That's because our selector is still back in the home position. Now we've got the tool head triggered and the extruder triggered. We have finished checking all the end stop switches. That will complete step number 2. We'll move on to step number 3, which is to check the motor movement and direction. We're going to issue our MMU motors off again, just to make sure that nothing's holding us up. So paste that right into the console, and we're going to take the selector, again, since our motors are off, move it right back to the middle. That will make sure that it's moving the right way without jamming into anything. We're going to go back to our Happy Hair web page and just issue this MMU home command. Paste it right in there. And now I'm going to switch us back to the webcam so you can see what happens. And behind the scenes, I'm going to hit the go button. It has gone the wrong way. We're going to go back into our console and we're going to turn the motors off and we're going to move the selector back into the middle. You notice my ERCF is just kind of sitting on top of the Trident, and my other one that's actually hooked up to it is here on the side going up and down. I'm just using this one I built for a friend in order to demonstrate this. Thanks, John. I appreciate you letting me use this. Our selector is back in the middle. We're going to go to MMU base, MMU hardware.cfg. We're going to scroll down to the stepper section. In the stepper section, we're going to go down here to the second part and look for this direction pin. And what we're going to do is we're going to put a not sign there, or an exclamation point to the rest of the English-speaking world. Computer coders, they speak a whole different language. And we're going to hit save and restart. And we're going to go back and try MMU home again. And I'm going to switch over to the webcam so you can see what happens when I push the go button. And there we go. It goes and it successfully homes. And you should see it come up and tell you that tool 0 is enabled. So it is right now at the position where it thinks tool 0 is. We have not calibrated that yet, so it might be a little off. Don't worry about that. Everything's golden as long as it homes correctly. I mentioned that Happy Hair talks about the enable pin or the direction pin. You can read up on that. It's right here. That'll explain it better than I can. The next step is to do it with the gear stepper. Now the gear stepper is what drives the filament from the buffer to the tool head and back. So that's the other motor we're going to look at. Once again, we're going to do MMU motors off. There we go. MMU motors off. The next step is to do the MMU test move 100 speed equals 50. And it's simple as copy and paste again. Now what that means is it's going to do a test move, which tells Happy Hair we're just testing, we're not actually doing anything important here. We're going to move 100 millimeters, and we don't have any filament in there. It's just a placeholder to tell it to spin the motor so that you can see what's happening, and the speed is going to be 50. You can change these, it doesn't matter, but I would highly suggest not going above 50 on your speeds when you're calibrating, because it makes calibration a real pain. Once you're done with all your calibration, bump that up and start playing with what speeds it can do. In order to do that, you can come in here to MMU parameters.cfg and scroll down here. This gear max velocity right here is the important part. It will never go faster than that. So just bump that down to 50 while you're calibrating it. Everything will be great. And your calibration's done, you can come back in there, move that up, and then start playing with the individual speeds. We have our console command we're going to put in here, MMU test move. Copy that, paste it in, and I'll switch back over to our handy dandy camera so you can see what happens behind the scenes. Now, before I hit the go button, the important part here to learn about is when it goes forward, it's going to drive the filament this way. The top of the gear is what drives the filament. The gear's down in here. The filament rides across the top. So what you want to see is over here, this gear motor, you want the top of that gear motor to move forward, and also the knob. I'm going to turn this a bit just so you guys can see that knob. There it is. So here, the top of the knob wants to come towards us or towards the encoder. When we hit the go button, we should see that happen. There we go. It's going the right way. That's what's important. That nasty chugga 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 sound beforehand is called a stepper buzz. And what that does is wiggles it back and forth before it tries to move filament, because when we push on these top hats here, sometimes the gears don't line up and the servo pushes it down. Wiggling that back and forth like that just allows the gears to come from like this to this. That's all that is. Don't worry about it. Now, I want to make sure that everything goes the right direction in both directions. So we'll copy that, put it in here. It's the same command, except we've got a negative 100. And we should see it turn the wrong way. Yep, it went backwards. So that's good. That means the stepper motor is configured. The next step is to check the ERCF encoder. The ERCF has an encoder, others don't. I think the TradRack does not have one. I am not sure about the MMUs from Prusa, whether they use an encoder or not, but the ERCF uses an encoder and we need to check it. The easy way to do that, and it is really easy, is just copy and paste this into our console. What you're going to see is some information here. It doesn't show this in Happy Hair, so there's some extra stuff that it spits out now, I think, since it update. But the important part I want to see is this guy right here, this first line. Right now it says the encoder is at 0. That means it has not moved. Now keep in mind that the encoder is a non-directional device. It doesn't know which way it's moving, it just knows it moves. So what we're going to do is switch back to the webcam so you can see what's going on. Now I'm going to put some filament in here. And you should see in there the little guy's eyes light up and blink as it moves past the encoder. So I'm not sure if you can see that on the camera and move it. You should see the encoder lights blink. That's a pretty good indication that the encoder's seeing something. The more you move it, the more bigger numbers you're going to get. We're going to hit the same command again. Up arrow works fine. Now you see we've got an encoder position of 231. Remember, it only counts up because the encoder is non-directional. So the more you move that back and forth, gazing at the blinky eyes in the encoder, the higher this number is going to get. As long as it counts up, that's fine. It doesn't really matter right now what those counts are. We just need to make sure that it's seeing something done. Our next step is to check the other sensors have fitted. On the ERCF, the other sensors are going to be those pre-gate sensors. So the easy way for this one for me is to go back and do that MMU motors off. Now, mess with the selector until we can get into gate 0, and I'm just going to push it in through the front. And once we get past the encoder, might need to wiggle it. There we go. Now, I'm just going to shove this filament in until it goes clear back into the gate switch. What we should see, if everything's good, and go to your dashboard, the easiest way I know to check this is just to scroll down. Here we go. You got your extruder sensor that's empty. The tool head sensor is empty. That's great. We don't have any filament in there. We want to see that. Right now, here I put it in gate 0. It says it's empty. but everything else says it's detected. So guess what we get to do? We get to go into our machine and hardware config, and we get to scroll clear down here to all of these right here. Now you see that each one of these has a pull-up resistor. That's good for a normally open switch. We want to keep it that way. That's the little caret. It adds in a pull-up resistor on the circuit, which drops zero voltage to zero. So the voltage isn't floating around somewhere between 0 and 3.3 volts or whatever. But anyway, we want to delete all these not signs or exclamation points. Okay, I've got them all set up. You'll notice that my gates are backwards. Yours should start at 0 and go clear to 11 if everything's right. The kit I built this from is a beta kit. The PCB for the gate switches is labeled wrong, so I wired it up wrong. Anyway, this is how it has to be for this one. Backwards, yours should be the same. But you'll notice I've taken all the not signs out. I'm going to hit save and restart. And scroll back down and look, here we go. We've got MMU 0 is detected, MMU gate 1 is empty, everything else is empty. That's what we want to see. You can test the rest of them. I don't want to bore you with doing all that. So next we want to check the servo. Okay, here we are back at the ERCF. You can see in there is the servo. I'm going to yank this piece of filament out we had. I'll use this as a nifty little pointer. The servo right down there does not have the servo arm on it yet. You want to leave it off until you're done with calibration. The point of this exercise is to check that the servo is working. MMU test buzz motor, and the motor equals servo. We're going to copy it. We're going to paste it into the console, and we're going to hit the go button, and I'm going to hold my mic up there so you can hear the servo as it moves. 1 second, please. It should wiggle back and forth a couple times when I hit the go button. Okay, that's about all you get. You're not concerned with direction. You just want to make sure the servo moves. In Happy Hare, it says you can try servo up and servo down. That's not necessary at this point. We've confirmed that the servo moves. Now we've checked the servo. That is everything that needs to be checked as far as the hardware. We made sure all the hardware stuff is working. We made sure the motor moves in the right ways. We made sure the servo works, selector works, gate switches work, tool head switches work. All that is configured and working the way it's supposed to. All right. As you can see, while you were gone, the background suddenly became even more bland. What we have accomplished in the meantime is we've set up the selector motor, we've set up the gear stepper, we've set up the servo, and we've set up all of the gate switches and tool head switches. This is the end of the hardware checks. Everything else is going to be up to software and configuring all the files in the ERCF. So thanks for stopping by. If you want to know anything more about the ERCF or Happy Hare, take a look at one of my other videos. It's probably up here somewhere, I think. I don't know. Do you see it? I don't see it. All right. Take it easy. We'll see you next time. Bye.